one of the books that he talks about that he read a bunch is a book called Men Against Fire. And it's based on his interviews and reporting on World War II. And that book made some claims, and some of the claims that the book made are just patently untrue. Just lie. They're just not true. And the biggest of the lies, is that right to call it a lie? The biggest of the claims, maybe it's a lie. The biggest of the untruths, we'll call it that. The biggest of the untruths revolves around this notion that SLA Marshall presents that in combat, only about 15% of the soldiers on the battlefield in combat actually fire their weapons at all. 15%. Now, that's a really strange thing to say. Now, and knowing what I know now, I think he may have done that for a couple of reasons. And I'm not making excuses. I'm saying this is why I think he would do that. Because there's no excuse for doing this. The first is I think he wanted to have a theory or a hypothesis that was like kind of shocking and would gain him some publicity, right? That's a shocking thing. When you hear, hey, in combat, only 15% of people fire their weapons, right? You're going, what are you talking about? That's crazy. So I think he wanted to have something to discuss that would bring him out to the limelight, the shocking claim. And second, I think he saw that there was an actual problem, right? That maybe not as many people shot their weapons in combat as should, and he wanted to fix that problem. So, was it 85% of the people that weren't shooting the weapon? No. But maybe the number was a decent percentage that didn't shoot or could have shot more. Is that possible? Yeah, I could say that that's possible. Maybe not as many people were shooting as you would have liked. So that's why I think he got focused on that particular subject. And I think the normal human life things, right? I think he had a big ego, which actually I don't think he did. He had a big ego. He was insecure. I think he made up some of these other stories, which are horrible. To make up stories about your combat experience, this is a big mistake. I think this is, in many ways, this is like one of the first documented cases of stolen valor, right? And obviously I don't like stolen valor. So there's a lot of negativity around SLA Marshall. And I have to be careful because it's very easy for me to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Mm-hmm. And when okay, so I'm here to learn, right? And despite these very, very significant character shortfalls, here's the facts. The books that he wrote guided the military and had a significant impact on military leaders for many years, including Hackworth. So eventually I had to look and see what is in these books and what, if anything, I could learn from the books. And I think from my perspective, okay, so he did massive amounts of interviews with people. And he did have, he wasn't in D-Day. He was there a month later interviewing people, finding out what happened. So he talked to a lot of people. And I think his perspective, and same thing with World War I, he wasn't there, but he was close to it. And he talked to a lot of people. And then he spent his time in the Pacific Theater, and he spent time in Korea. So he had perspective. It's not the perspective that he claimed to have. And if he would have been smart and just said, look, I wasn't on the front lines, but I talked to a lot of people. I was in the military. I have a good perspective. Here's what I've learned. If he would have said that, it would have been fine. Unfortunately, he didn't say that. Do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? My initial gut reaction is yes, liar. Yep. Right?
Sure.
Right? Hey, no, I'm not going to listen to this guy. Mm-hmm. But I had to think about it. If this book influenced the military so much, and this book in particular, the book is Men Against Fire, is the big book that he wrote. I say the big book. It's the book that he wrote after World War II. I think it came out in 1947. And it had a big influence. And I can tell you that it had a big influence. It had a big influence, and this is what's funny. It had a big influence because so I guess the facts about his career came out after he died. He died in 1977, and the facts came out some years after that, right? I would hear quotes from SLA Marshall all the time when I was in. This guy's a known liar. Again, maybe that's a harsh word, but he did not tell the truth. And when it comes to like making up what you did in combat, you kind of earn yourself the name liar. Yeah. So the guy lied, and yet I would hear quotes from what he said and what he taught and what he thought, and a lot of it made sense, right? Yeah. So, okay, is it true that even a broken clock is right twice a day?
Yeah.
That's still a pretty small percentage, but I'd hear quotes from SLA Marshall that were correct, and it wasn't a small number of quotes. And so I think despite his ego, despite his lying, he had he had gathered a lot of good information and talked to enough people that he actually started to make sense, and he saw people in multiple different wars. Again, did he see it to the degree that he claimed to? No. But there's a lot of military historians that were never in any kind of combat whatsoever, that were never even in the military. Yeah. There's plenty of very respected. I've got books in the queue, and I don't know if I'll ever cover them, but I've got books in the queue that are great books about war and about the military that were written by people that were never in the military. There's military theorists that were never in the military that I have a great deal of respect for. So, and that they say sensible things. So is there a question of character? Yes. Are we going to throw the baby out with the bathwater? I'm going to try not to. I'm going to try and see what we can learn. And I think from when I read this book, and I read this book a long time ago, and I don't know. Anyways, I got stuff out of it, and I think there's actually, I'm going to tell you, I think there's actually a lot to get out of this book. And if nothing else, it reflects and reinforces some lessons and brings some other ones, it paints them a little bit more clearly.